Well, hello there. I'm Sandy Allnock with the Create in Color segment for MFT for this month. And I'm going to use two stamp sets together. The Woodland Friends and the Friendly Raccoons go together really nicely. Their images are sized perfectly for each other. And my thought was to teach you how to make each one of them in a little tiny vignette scene. And it's going to be really easy, so if you are somebody who just wants to do something simple to add a little extra sparkle to your card that'll make them a little seasonal, this is the video for you. I've stamped each pair, taking one animal from each stamp set, because I want to make one a fall scene and one is a winter scene, because you know winter is coming. I have to tell you, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but winter is coming and it's time to start thinking about it. This is a way that you could get a fall card and a winter card at the same time very easily. So you could make a whole bunch of these. You could use these critters. You can use all different kinds of critters from MFT because they have lots of them that would work. But I'm going to color each pair of animals first, and then we'll add leaves onto one of them so that they're standing in a big pile of leaves, and the other one will be standing in a pile of snow. And we'll make them really easy and knock out two seasonal cards at once. So in this video, I'm going to color the first one at real time, and then we'll speed through the second one so that we can kind of get through some of the basic coloring and make our way towards those little vignette scenes. I'm using the N markers for my little raccoons. No particular reason. You can use the C's, the W's, the N's, the T's, does not really matter. For the most part, if you don't see them next to each other, you don't really know the difference. Most people can't tell. I can tell, but most people can't tell. The neutrals are just a nice gray, and they'll work really great. So I'm using an 8, a 6, and a 4, and then I'll be jumping down to a 1 for some of the lighter parts. But one of the things that I really loved about these raccoons, I'm just going to have to give MFT some little shout out credit for this. I am really tired of having to make my raccoons raccoon-like when I use other stamps, because lots of raccoon stamps, they don't have, like, raccoons have the black eye, then they have white around them, and then they go to the gray. And a bunch of people just make the mask itself, and they don't give you the room to have all three colors. And it doesn't look quite like a raccoon if it doesn't have all the colors. So yeah, there you go. There's my little mini rant for today. And it's a positive rant because I'm really happy with these little raccoons. So I drew some little fur on them so I could get some texture in there, and went over it with my N4 color. But I'm going to let it dry first before I decide if I'm going to add more in it. A lot of times with Copic markers, when the alcohol is wet on the paper, you can't exactly tell whether you've got the blending down right or not. So you might color a card one day and you go back the next day and you're thinking, was I blind yesterday? That would be why, because alcohol wets the paper. If you've ever done any colorless blender on a blank piece of paper, you'll see that it turns like a grayish color because it's wet. And once that wetness dries, then you're able to tell a little more clearly what the blending looks like. So I often go through at the end and kind of tidy things up a little bit. And I will end up doing that on these little guys too, because they're blending on their foreheads. It's not looking great, but I wanted to let them dry a little bit before I go back in now with that N6 and just fill that in. And I'm leaving some of that fuzzy on the very top of the head, so they have little cute fuzzies. The bodies were just bothering me, even though they had a little bit of shading to them. Kind of wanted to get rid of a little bit of that so that they're smoothed out, just a tiny, tiny tidge. And then throw a little bit more into the tails. Little raccoons are adorable. One of these days I want to make one of these little raccoons into a red panda. There's a guy I follow on Twitter who's all about the red pandas, and I thought it'd be really fun to make a card with a red panda sometime. So who knows? Watch my Instagram. I might do that sometime. So the little bunny, I decided to use the W's because in all of this, I kind of like having some neutral colors when I'm going to do a little scene like this, and keeping them, I don't know, more simple rather than trying to get crazy with the colors. And the W's are a little more on the brown side, so I get a little difference in color from the ends, but they both stay in this very neutral, kind of naturalistic kind of color. And one of the things about cutting off the toes, by the way, is that I wasn't aware where his legs stopped and started, that sort of thing. So I was trying to figure out where the shading would go on the legs. So that's a little bit of an issue. If you only have colored them without feet, it's a little harder to follow and find exactly where the shapes are supposed to end up. But as I started doing this, notice how the color is getting kind of mottled. It's getting kind of funky because I've gone over some dark color with light color. And that just happens when you're going over dark color with light color. It's like going over it with colorless blender. So I'm moving on for the moment to do some shading on the face, on the white part, while the body dries. Give it a couple seconds to settle in there, because if I start putting more color in before it's completely dry, sometimes that makes it even harder to work with. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go back in with my W6, make it nice and dark, make him a little dark bunny, and then start putting a little bit of shading elsewhere too, and go in with the number 4 marker and add a little bit more onto the front of him. And just a few strokes is enough to make the body smooth out much more than it had been previously, because I really just wanted to get on to doing the little leaves and the little snow pile. So a little pile of leaves is really easy to do. Just make some dots. And in my autumn leaves class, I have kind of not really explained that very well. So hopefully a lot of my students will come over here. I'll send them over to look at this. But a lot of people just do dots like this. And what I recommend is doing sideways flicks. See how these are more of like little sideways marks than they are polka dots? Because they're going to look a little more like leaves if they have a little bit of shape to them. You don't have to draw every single one. But with each successive darker layer, I'm going to add a little more definition to them. And you'll see that as I go, because I'm kind of making more deliberate leaf strokes rather than just making polka dots. Because otherwise they could look like they're sitting in confetti, which might not be a bad thing. Maybe you want to have a birthday card where they're sitting in a pile of confetti. That would be kind of cool too, in all kinds of bright colors. But if you're trying to make it look like leaves, it's helpful to have it look a little bit like, I don't know, like leaf shape-ish at the very least. So that will be helpful. And I'm just going with successively darker and darker colors. You don't have to follow these colors at all, just anything that's leaf-like. You could focus on doing all yellow leaves or all orange leaves or something, and just use all your orange and your yellow markers, but I like using all the different colors. So I'm putting a little darker color right around the bottoms of each of the animals, because that's going to give them a little anchor and make them look like they're kind of standing into the leaves. And then I'm drawing a couple little shadows on a few leaves here and there, just a little bit more, and then going over it with my YR04 and just kind of darkening a few spots, because I don't want to have it look kind of like polka dotty. And I kept trying to figure out what to do with it next. I thought, well, maybe I just need to blend it more with my Y17 and just really kind of smush the color together. And then I decided to get out the complementary color, the V25, and that started looking more like leaves to me, just putting a few strokes of that in there, because it's the complementary color, it's the opposite. So it's going to dull them down a little bit, and it worked perfectly for what I wanted. Now for the snow, the B45 is going to be my darkest color. I'm just going to do that bottom part to anchor the little critters in the snow. So the deepest part of the snow is right there beside their little bottoms. And then I'm using a B41 to create a little bit of scuffly around and kind of little scumbly marks. Not a ton, because if you put a ton in, it's going to look like they're in a pile of blue confetti. We don't want that either. We want it to look like snow. And then I took the B000 and I'm just going to blend everything out so it's good and soft, just nice and soft edges to it. And depending on how much snow you're going to make, you can add a little bit more than this and go out further. But I wanted just that little vignette pile of snow. But then I thought, wait a minute, footprints, little footprints would be really cute. So I added a little snow coming forward. and then went back in with my B41 and added just a couple footprints. It's really fun in snow to make it look like they walked over to where they are, and then added some snow on top of them. It's a white background, so I don't need to do snow everywhere, but I can do snow wherever there's color. And that's one of the reasons for making your winter cards have a good bit of color in your animals so that the snow really shows up. And that's also why you want to use more than just a B0 for your snow. The B4s help to give it a little more beef so that you can put the snow coming down right over top of them. Make sure you break up some of the stamp image lines because that's going to help them to actually look a little bit nicer there. And I did catch those hands at the end for anybody who's probably panicked that I missed coloring the raccoon's hands. So my finished cards, I did some layering with the stitched A2 dies, and then I just popped that layer as well as the sentiment layer on a nice blank white card to make really crisp, simple cards. So hope you enjoyed this and that you'll try it yourself, and I'll see you again next month.